In this program, I have a very unique guest, Roger van Zandvoort. He is the creator of a complete dynamic software and famous complete repertory. The reason I wanted to make interview with him is because I wanted to show the homeopathic community that what is the tremendous effort behind any repertory. And from the master of creator, I want to have some tips how best we can utilize, like how to best use of it, how to make most of it. So, Roger, welcome.
Thank you for inviting me, Sarah.
I would like to start, like, how you become a homeopath. Like, I want to start from the very early time.
It wasn't it wasn't my initial intention actually. As you know, I'm very much enchanted in general by nature. Because of that, I became automatically more or less interested in herbal medicine. Herbal medicine was the first reason that I made this connection. By studying herbal medicine, the more detailed herbal medicine actually became slowly homeopathy. Through mostly Börike's work, his materia medica consists a lot of remedies that we initially also used in herbal medicine, but with a lot of details that make it more homeopathic also. So I was kind of pulled out of herbal medicine into homeopathy. And I did study homeopathy parallel and in the same time as I studied herbal medicine. But I thought it was pretty complicated. Slowly, my curiosity for, through the herbal medicines, my curiosity for homeopathy that I had studied, so I knew the principles, etc., etc. I studied it already 3 years. Slowly, the homeopathy became more interesting. I finished it also in the school that I visited, so I had examens, etc., etc. And then after that, I became really interested in homeopathy through following the lectures by George Vitulkas. That was my main motivator to continue studying homeopathy, and since that time, that's nearly 40 years ago now, it never stopped because it's an ongoing study, whether or not you do it to help people in practice or whether or not you do it to build a repertory.
Okay, so you were interested in traditional phytotherapy and that bring you to homeopathy. You choose to create a repertory while some paper repertories already exist. How from being homeopath you decide to create a repertory?
It's a good question. I think it has to do with something that has nothing to do with phytotherapy or homeopathy initially, but I explain. My family from my father's side and my family from my mother's side, they were all technical people. Car repair, garage, motor work, and from my father's side, engineers, building engineers. So it's not exactly that that would ever become my favorite desire to be, but I see now that from them I got a love for tools.
Aha.
Can you see how where this is going? The love of tools is something that you need to have also in homeopathy. That one of the big tools that we do have in homeopathy is the repertory. And what I learned through my parents is that doesn't matter what you go to do, start with good tools. In that light, I started already adding data into the repertory, into Ken's repertory, and also into the synthetic repertory that was available at that time as a book. Yeah, everything was as a book. I saw already in that time that some things were in, some things were not in. The question was, why are they not in? Why are they in? Also, another question. Slowly, by diving more and more into the material, for which you actually need to go into the provings, slowly interest and understanding of what was needed became better and better. And I like collecting things. That's another thing that I had as a boy already, I collected butterflies, I collected plants. I had a whole room full, was more like a zoo than a room for a boy. But I liked it. So there was this interest, motivated by this idea that you need to have a good tool in order to become an artist or become a good craftsman. This tool that was a repertory kind of was interesting for me. That's why I started to improve on it and add to it.
Synthetic repertory was the only repertory available at the time, or mock repertory was existed too?
No. I became a collector of repertory. Of course, in our education at the school, we used Kent's repertory.
No, I mean the modern repertories. Like there are more than 50 repertories existed.
Actually, at the time I'm talking about, so the beginning of the 80s, I think there was mostly Kent's repertory. There was Berningshausen, but it was not well known. There was Nares. There were, of course, a lot of repertories already. Kent was definitely the one that also I think George Fitukas used, and so that was promoted the most, which I think is something that was happening already since the end of the 19th century, because Kent was a good repertory maker, but he was also a good businessman, I think, or at least he needed to be a good businessman because he really needed to sell his repertory due to the expenses that he made. He needed to have that covered. So he was a big promoter of his own material, and fortunately, he was professor at several studies. So he pushed his repertory through. I think the main reason is that its structure is very good already for the way it was made at that time. The head to toe scheme, which is actually not invented by him, but he promoted it and he built on it. And to a lesser degree, of course, it was quite a complete repertory, although there were still many things missing. But it was a good repertory, and it was the one that was promoted in school. If you wouldn't dive into it any further, that is all you knew, so you were using that repertoire.
Oh, it was also the first repertory that I was advised.
Yeah, I can understand that. It's maybe not so much now anymore, but let's say up to at least 20 years ago, it was the most promoted repertory in the world.
Since we are talking about 80s, my background is also computer science. The PC is not invented. Apple is invented in 80 and IBM PC came out 81. The modern printing books available at that time and you are trying to update it. No computers, no softwares yet.
Handwork.
Handwork.
Yeah, monks' work. Book against book, comparing one book with another book, and using one book, one Kent repertory, to add in by hand a lot of things with slips of paper, etc., etc.
And no computer and no internet.
No,
and no mobile phones.
no, nothing like that. Just for the love of it.
So, how did the first computer repertory come up? Like, it maybe it should at least take maybe another 10 years, I assume.
No, shorter. I think I'm not sure about the history of the radar repertory, but I think they started to develop a digital repertory also around 84, somewhere around that time, on a kind of, I don't know exactly technically, but on a kind of mainframe computer at that time.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, something like that. I understood they worked on a system that was actually more for universities than it would be for private people, and very expensive also. And then also the parallel, more or less parallel to that development, was the development also of Kent's repertory.
Well, it was another big surprise that Apple started slightly earlier because Apple, the first personal computer, IBM actually came slightly later. So it is normal that Apple guy bring it down to personal computer first?
When I saw, I think that was in 85 or 86, that Mac Repertory came out with the possibility to adjust the repertory modification possible by individual users, I bought that system.
Oh, nice.
That was on a Macintosh Plus, Mac Plus, the little box, the 9-inch widescreen box. But it worked, and it worked quite well. And that was the time that I started to incorporate what I had collected already from before, from the years before, into Ken's repertory. And it grew and it grew and it grew. And I think by what was it, 80, 87, 87, 88, I connected to David Walkington. He offered to promote this repertory that I'm working on as a new repertory. And that's how we baptized it Complete Repertory. It was far from complete in that time, but it was a catchy name. Yeah.
So are you saying that Mac repertory and your repertory originally start together?
Mac Repertory, no, not they didn't start together, but Mac Repertory was selling with Kent Repertory as a basic repertory, and then I connected to them and I told them, look, I am working on something on top of Kent, and I would like to do something with that, or maybe David told me you should do something with that. I don't remember. But that's how it started, and I went to see them in California, and I helped in the development also of some of the other repertories that they were having, and that's how it started to grow. And then around 92, 93, I think, 94 maybe, I don't know exactly, I had some other people that had a repertory that would work also on Windows. I think it was Cara from England, David Whitco. He wanted to promote and to sell my repertory too. So that's how it started to divert also to other programs and companies. And now I think 2020 we have about eight or nine different companies that work with Complete Repertory.
That is one of the things that I appreciate Complete Repertory business intelligence very much as a corporate experienced person, because Complete Repertory as a repertory knowledge not only available through Complete Dynamics interface which you and your colleague created, but it is available to other software companies and homeopathy companies who want to use just homeopathic information. What you created as a homeopathic information, in fact, not only available from your company, but available through other people who want to use in their presentation, in their user interface experience at different price, different versions. That make more choice for customers, more choice for homeopath, different pricing, different business models, different purchasing possibilities. I think is in a sense very good for bringing homeopathy to a wider audience.
That's what I wanted.
Your personal effort was initially started with the people in California under Mac repertory, but when did you create the Complete Repertory with the name Complete Repertory as a separate company?
Never. The only involvement that I had commercially with several companies, initially with Kent Associates, was that I got a percentage for every sale that they made of my repertoire. And that's still the case. I am paid royalties for every sale, any program, and that's where it stops.
So it is as early as your initial work being recognized under Kent Associates.
Yes, for a couple of years, they were the first and also the only company that I sold Complete Repertory with. So People could have it if they paid it as an extra on top of Mac Repertory with Kent. They could also choose as an add-on Complete Repertory.
That also gave you the idea that this is a good business model, and then when others came with this idea, you continue to use this model.
By that time, I saw already to work on the repertory, and after all these years, I can only confirm that that was a good move. To work on the repertory takes all your time, and to be involved with another company, to be involved with anything else. Okay, you can do it, but it will cost time that normally you would spend working on the repertory. And I love working on the repertory. After all these years, I still do. So why give up something that I passionately like to do to go be a businessman or something like that?
How did the complete dynamics come up?
Complete Dynamics is very interesting project, which is why I did it together with Eduard van Grinsven. He connected to me and he asked me, are you interested to make a program in relation to Complete Rap? I forgot about that, but this is around the year 2010, 2009. A little bit earlier because he started developing maybe in 2008. I don't know exactly, but he told me that he had contacted me already in the past, I think 94, 95, shortly, in which time I had a lot of trouble that had to do with becoming free to go with my data wherever I want, which was what I wanted to do, to make it available for as many people as possible. I had a threatening court case with the Kent Associates people because they didn't want me to go to another software. That was what they wanted as a business move. But fortunately, we didn't have anything written like that on paper, so it never happened, which is good for me, maybe not good for them. The good thing that happened because of that is that they also started developing a Windows version that initially they didn't want to do, but due to the fact that I was free to go with Complete Repertory where I wanted to go, they were more or less forced to also come out with a Windows version to not lose the competition. And they did that, and I think that was a good move, and it's good for them even now.
Yes, because the Apple lovers really love Apple, but at that time, particularly, Apple market share in the personal computing was less than 10%. So anybody who want to sell something for the personal computer people forced into Windows arena because of the success of Microsoft. That is inevitable.
Yeah, inevitable. But you asked me how I came to the work done together with Eduard with Complete Dynamics. That became a kind of joint mutual project in which I brought in the repertory and he brought in his programming experience that after all these years working with him now, I must say is really, really very high quality. We decided that we made a kind of different business approach this time. Two things. It was a kind of joint venture, number one. And number two, finally, after all these years having experience with different software companies, this collaboration with Eduard was the first time that I could also build my ideas into the software. Because I never did that before, but I had a lot of experience working with that, with several softwares, talking to the developers, talking to the managers of the company, etc. Often about things that they didn't want to do, that I thought homeopathically would be a good idea, but they didn't want to do, or they thought it was too risky a business model or anything. And it was also the first time that we decided not to sell Complete Repertory as a unique repertory, but to do a subscription-based business model, which would make it much less expensive and more into the reach of many more people. Because homeopaths in general, often doctors, but they don't have the money like doctors.
I find this business model is a very successful one because it was very early idea to rent a software. Only big corporations renting software to big corporations. To rent a personal software to an individual user is actually like very innovative idea, especially in the homeopathy world. You are the very first company to do that in such environment. Not only the idea, but also the time. Like it is still the early times for personal computers, bulky notebooks, no cell phones. But you are using this business model to make it affordable, to make it wider.
Yeah, that is the main reason. Make it affordable.
And the internet is still not so widely available. The communication speed is not very high like today. It is, how to say, it is very a bold action.
Well, for us, the main reason was affordability, like you said already, because throughout all these years that I am working with software companies, I also hear a lot of, and I talked a lot. I used to travel a lot. Now, the last years, I don't do that anymore. But I used to travel a lot. I worked as a representative also for Kent Associates in the past. And I talked to a lot of people. And for many people, I could see it was a very expensive move to buy a PC, to buy software, to buy Complete Repertory. So I thought I had business arrangements with the other companies that also limited me in my options. If I was going to work with another company, maybe that was going to do a subscription model. But because we developed it within my own company, that was actually just there to distribute the Complete Repertory, we had the possibility without having any other software companies complaining about this, that we could actually do this. Is a legal thing.
As a technology person, I want to explain one thing to our audience that at the moment there are three technological and business model for homeopathy software to be purchased and used. One, you buy a full software, it will be yours, but you have to pay the upgrades if you want to change the version you are going to use. And the second model is yours. You rent the software. During your rental time, you get all the updates free. And the third one is cloud computing. Nothing you purchase is installed on your computer. You just use a browser. You still rent the software, but you need a permanent internet connection to use the software.
And the fourth one is to give it away for free.
Is there one like that? Well, very few.
We do that.
Ah, yes. You mean the Sunday afternoon? Yeah. Yes, it's good that you reminded it. Now, with your permission, I want to tell my experience, how I first come into contact with you. Because as a computer guy and recently interested in homeopathy, I eventually find out complete dynamics and complete repertory. And then I realized that it is free on Sunday afternoons. So I immediately install it and start using it. In Turkey, the law doesn't allow you to professionally see patient if you are not a doctor.
Okay, yeah.
So I wasn't seeing any patient, but I use it for my own health. So I was using it fully Sunday afternoons, and it was okay for me. Usually I could wait 1 week if there is nothing urgent, and then I will do the full work with totally free software with all the capabilities, no limitations, etc. And the more I use it, I realize that it's a wonderful software with all these features and all the things that please my technical mind.
Yeah. In your situation. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Not just like my situation as homeopath, but because I'm a system engineer who work for a big company. So I know I can recognize a good software.
I need to specify the fourth option a little bit more because you talk about free on Sunday afternoons. That's correct. If you look at the combination Complete Dynamics as a software with Complete Repertory, what I'm pointing out also is that this fourth option is free not only on Sunday afternoons if you consider it as just using the Complete Repertory as a browser, because that you can do any day of the week, even without paying. But indeed, you are right. If you want to use analysis within Complete Dynamics, with Complete Repertory, then you need to, well, the first month you can do it anyhow, but that's not free. That's a kind of bonus. But if you wait till Sunday afternoons, doesn't matter what time of the year or how long ago you ever downloaded the software, you can do that for free anyhow.
That is a good reminder. Yes, when you buy a homeopathic repertory, the book doesn't give you the analysis option anyway. You have to do a lot of paperwork for analysis.
Yeah, and the good thing about the free option in Complete Repertory any day of the week is that it comes in a like an ebook more or less. But all the searches for words and rubrics and remedies and grades you can still do. That's a free bonus from us.
And you can still update it online. You can always use the latest version anytime. It will work on your PC. It will work on your phone.
Yeah, I do this. I like the gesture, but I do it for homeopathy. I think I cannot do it in other programs, but in this program, I have said to Edward in the beginning, this is what I want to do. If you cannot agree with this, we maybe should not do the project. But I like to present it in this way because I feel good about that.
I really appreciate it. And that is why I am trying to make people know about it. In my own social media account, from time to time, I keep reminding these features, your software, because there aren't a lot of homeopathy software anyway. But you are the only one who gives this option forever free. Like I can use the repertory itself anytime, any device, and then if I purchase, I only purchase actually the analyze and materia medica sections.
There's a little bit more to it. When I was still producing books, which we stopped doing in 2000, but in the first edition that I ever brought out, 1995, I think, I wrote, "All that is not given is lost" in the introduction. And all that is not given is lost. If you don't give something, who can ever use it? Because nobody will know what it is.
This I couldn't understand very well. Can you rephrase in different way?
So it's a saying, yeah, it's an expression. All that is not given is lost. If you don't want to give something, then you lose it to humanity in this case.
Nobody use it. Yeah, exactly. Uh-huh.
Take that as a motto. What actually came out is I wanted to do it this way, okay, and it works, and many people are happy with this, and this was my aim. But actually, to be honest with you, it's obviously also a very good commercial modus
Yes, I agree.
because we see that people, because of this, they jump in to use it. And that's fine. If they don't want to do a subscription, that's totally fine with me. That's why I did it. But meanwhile, because it's a well-made program and you would like to use the analysis not only on Sunday afternoon for many people, this is a very attractive way of telling people, okay, if you want to do a subscription, you can always use it. And that works obviously very well.
It did work for me. I eventually purchased it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. If there are personal benefits for the people who buy a subscription, they should definitely do it, because it probably means that either, like you, for yourself or for your family, but of course mostly for patients, it works. It helps you to be a better homeopath, and that's ultimately what the aim of all this is.
I want to ask a question in this time because it's like the right time, I feel like. You have two versions, like practitioner version and a master version. Wouldn't it be easier to have just single version to manage and update or whatever kitchen work you do? Why do you have two versions?
The main difference between the practitioner version and the master version is that in the master version you can search not only in the repertory, but you can also search in materia medica. And our future, I don't know if that's actually going to happen the way we perceived it, but in the future we want to expand a lot on this. And therefore we kept that as the master version versus the practitioner version. You can also say we have the free version, we have the practitioner version, and then we have the master version. And I actually have with one more person, me and Eduard have a grandmaster version.
Oh, you don't release it. You use
No,
yourself.
it's for the testing and the research and etc. Yeah. And there actually is a translator version too. The translator version uses a separate module that enables people in a more or less time-saving and elegant way to make translations for complete repertory.
So there is a tool for the translator to translate complete repertory.
Yeah, it's a tool that I developed long time ago with another programmer for as a standalone program for me to use. And the concept and the ideas that came from that software are now integrated in this translator module. And that is the reason that in a relatively short time, in now 10 years, we have readied about 9 or 10 languages, and we are still working on several more. And the fact that we can do this, because it depends on the enthusiasm and the motivation of the translators, and I do the German translation, it's not an easy job. The fact that we come with a good software to help you with that is a real bonus. And that's why also the translations that are made for Complete Repertory with this translator module in Complete Dynamics are going very well.
So we hope to see the more language availability in the coming years.
Well, you know, we are busy with Turkish language too.
Really? Wow, it's a good news for our Turkish audience.
It reminds me that I need to contact to the translator to see how he's actually doing. But I expect something quite soon. And what I can see meanwhile is that the amount of Turkish colleagues that we have in the big group on Facebook is going up.
Yes. At the moment, according to Ministry of Education, they certified 350 homeopaths.
Oh, very nice to hear that.
The real number who are interested in homeopathy is more, but the certification is only open to doctors, so this number show only the doctor number. But if you consider the greater number who are not doctors but still interested in homeopathy and going to association courses, etc., the number is bigger than this.
Yeah, I believe you immediately. Yeah, it's a good way of healing people. So there should be many people interested in it, especially if they want to look a little bit more far into healing people, as their nose is long, as we call it in Dutch. You know, if you just want to read things till where your nose goes, there are a lot of things you will never read. You need to expand your horizon a little bit more further, and then you come to things like homeopathy and the not so easily explainable things, you know. But it works. Once you have prescribed homeopathy in a right way and you see what it can do to a person, you don't want to do anything else.
Exactly. So only those who know the self-experience appreciate it. The people who are prejudged or never tried, they can't understand it.
That's my main complaint to people who oppose homeopathy. Most of them did never invest enough time to really know what it is, let be to try it in practice. Well, okay, then you are a bad scientific person. You know that's not scientific. Not trying what you are against, but having an opinion about it, that's not a good thing.
Okay, Roger. Now I want to move to a bit more technical side of developing things, because we discuss, or I sometimes ask personal question you privately, so you know Dr. Heiner's polarity analysis software. I translated into Turkish. So my experience is not as big as yours, but I have the taste of translating and reading old books. And then I realized that there is a lot of details that a regular user cannot see by using just a modern computer, that there are a lot of challenges creating the modern day knowledge from the old books. People forget that these old books are written under the gas lamps with quill pens, and then in the printing companies, maybe not so literate people who have sequenced the letters by hand using the doctor's handwriting with lead letters.
Making it an even more astonishing project.
Exactly. And then there are natural occurrence of errors, duplications, misunderstandings in those books. And then of the same book, there are different versions printed in different years by different translators, different printing companies.
Variations in language.
Yeah, exactly. The same English translation of different company, different translator, for the same rubric use different vocabulary. How do you deal with this? Like, you are creating a homogeneous, modern computer software, easy to understand, but your source is this.
Yeah, I need to say the modern part. Okay, the modern part about my work is probably that it's happening digital. That I would maybe call the most modern part of my work. I surely realize that still a lot of the nomenclature that I use is from 200 years ago. If I have time, maybe one time I will change some of that. It's not too urgent because important rubrics are mostly well understood. It's more about the more clinical terms that have changed over time and that maybe I should rename. For example, dipsomania in the past, we use alcoholism now. Mixturation, we use urination. Catamania, we use menses. Those kind of things. So partially I have been dealing with those already, but I do realize that for some part, even though it's a modern work, it still is stuck in the past. We still need to do quite some things to make it more modern. But like I said, the most important material, modalities, a lot of the rubrics that we have in the repertory already, they are okay. They won't change in 500 years. So that material, which is the most of it, is okay. But the clinical terms we still need to work on.
When you see a conflict between two reliable reference, they are reliable but they belong to, let's say, different year, different translator, different printing company, and you see some conflict. One remedy is there in the rubric and in the other version the remedy is not there, or if it is degree 2 but in the other one is degree 3. So how do you decide which one to put into complete repertory?
That's not always so easy. Recently, in the group in Facebook, I put this example. Maybe you saw it about a lot of the material in the repertory for females comes originally. Let's talk about the remedy pulsatilla, for example, famous one for female diseases. The funny thing is, though, that often the material is coming from the most original source, Hahnemann. And if you look into the Materia Medica Pura from Hahnemann, you see that for pulsatilla, all the provers, included Hahnemann himself, were men. So how is it possible that for pulsatilla there is so much female material while the provers were none of them were female? So then you need to look at the source material that Hahnemann used, that is coming from the end of the 18th century, even older material, that is difficult to get. And sometimes you can get it, but it's in Latin, and I don't read Latin, a little bit, but definitely not enough to know what I'm looking for. So there's a dilemma. The best you can do is go back, number one, to the oldest source that you can find. And if that's not enough, try to compare what different authors say about it and come to a context that you can understand, that is a mutual context, that is covered by all that is written by different people, and try to use the largest common denominator for that. It's not always like that. I, for example, also discovered that Nair, who made the repertory for his father-in-law, Mr. Hering, he sometimes writes certain symptoms during menses. When you look in Hering's Materia Medica, it's not during menses, it's before menses. So you need to be careful with those kind of things. So if I see something, because I have used so many sources already, it became a little bit easier for me, because now if I see something that I have different in the complete than what it says in another repertory or in another source in general, and I have several sources already who confirm what is in the complete, I become aware of that. So then I go to check again the most original source. How was it again? How was it put? But it's not an easy subject, so you need to dive into it. But every once in a while, two times per week, you find some mistake that you need to correct. No, it's a big part of the job, and it's very time consuming. And I need to say, the more you have already in your database, in the repertory, the more time consuming it becomes, versus the amount of extra information that you can take out of the Materia Medica and the sources that you use to put in as a new edition. So the new editions become more rare and more rare and more rare, while the amount of effort that you need to do to get to them becomes more and more and more.
I understand. In your personal opinion, the old data that we get from the 1950 period, you think is more reliable than the data we create in last 10 years? Or as a reference rubric? Because, nowadays we hear remedies like dolphin milk, we hear something like meditation proving. In your personal opinion, without talking about the actual third person's name, just the method. In your opinion, do you rely more on the old classical data or more recent data, or what is the balance? What is your preference?
I have always worked more or less in a chronological order. So I started with the oldest material. I kind of skipped Hahnemann for Alan because Alan took all of Hahnemann's information already into his work. So then I decided for myself at that time that it would be better to be more inclusive and take Alan's work as a beginning point. A little bit the same also with Hearing. But chronologically speaking, after 40 years of work, I am mostly still busy around 1930. And I just take it step by step from there. And then what a criticism that we got from many of the people who use Complete Repertory was that we were too conservative in that sense that we did not include enough contemporary material. I have nothing against well made contemporary material, but I wasn't doing that yet because I work in this chronological way. But now that Rajesh Rajendran is also working on the material as a co editor, his special task, so to speak, is to emphasize on the more contemporary provings. So we are doing them now much more than we did them in the past. I did one every once in a while, whether or not it's Lac Delphinum or another remedy. I think every remedy has its potential benefits. You don't know yet which they are because you need clinical confirmations for that, etc., etc. So we will see. I need to say I have some experience with putting data in that are quite recent. Some of those remedies I did about 15 years ago, and I have not seen that due to the additions that I made, more clinical confirmations would come out of the colleagues, of the homeopathic group. So I'm a little bit disappointed about that, and I don't know exactly what the explanation is for that. I also need to say that for the contemporary provings, I think the most interesting ones are the ones that, number one, are known to have an influence on people, from herbal medicine, maybe in the past, to the more toxic remedies. I think those are more interesting than any of the remedies that don't have these two parameters. Therefore, I sometimes say that anything that you can put on your bread in the morning is not so interesting as a remedy than those things that you prefer not to put on your bread in the morning.
Now, I want to move to more practical side of how to best use a computer repertory from the master creator. The more I use, I am actually using the master edition now. The more I use, I realize the difference you offer from the other software. So I will ask one by one, and you you give your opinion on it. One thing that I realize, you offer all the basic calculation formulas, like the traditional calculation for analysis is what is the rubric weight and what is the remedy weight in that rubric. Simple calculation. But in your calculations, like the complete repertory or complete dynamics recommended calculation, you use another formula then, because the simple calculation is already available as a separate calculation for the ones who want to use. But your recommended calculation is weighting the remedy not only in the current rubric but related rubrics as well. Can you explain how you come up with that formula and why you think that is better?
Through experience. The one that you mentioned where we call that the standard analysis. And it's actually not so standard. It's a very complicated analysis. One of the things that we put in that I think no other software puts in is that a part of that analysis, and I think it's also available as a separate analysis, is based on frequency. And what do we mean by that? I give you an example. If you have lachesis in the rubric generalities, morning aggravates, then you know that's a big thing for lachesis to have. Nux vomica too, but lachesis even more. How we know that lachesis has that even more than nux vomica, although both of them are already available in the 4th degree. So where do we make the difference? Yeah, the difference is that if you do a search for lachesis versus nux vomica throughout the repertory, for all the rubrics where you find it, one of them or both of them, in a rubric that is associated with a morning aggravation, like anxiety morning, like extremities pain, knee morning, you will see that although they are already 4th degree, both of them, the frequency, so the amount of times that lachesis shows up in these individual rubrics is higher than that it is for nux vomica. And we measure those instances, we put them on record, and we use them in analysis. So that's why we can do this. Is nothing new actually, because this is how Berningshausen works also. This is also how hearing works, but not so well known. But if you look at this in his condensed materia medica, you will see that he counts the instances of certain rubrics in the end of every remedy picture, which is the same thing. It's based on frequency. So I saw this in our literature. I saw that it was not worked out because that's not how Kant works in general. And that is probably the reason that it was left alone. But it's a very powerful strategy that can be extremely useful, especially if you use generalized modalities. That is where Berningshausen comes from. And if you use the large phenomena rubrics, because if you want to make a differentiation there, and you already have 200 4th degree remedies in that rubric, the 4th degree doesn't help you anything to differentiate between the remedies, which doesn't mean that you cannot differentiate between the remedies. If you use frequency option, you can definitely differentiate between the remedies. So we use that as a potentially powerful parameter in the analysis. And there are a couple more. In standard analysis, there's also a twist of small remedies. So if there are small remedies that are pushed up relatively high for being a small remedy, it gets emphasized even a little bit more in the standard analysis.
Since you mentioned it, I will jump into the small remedy immediately. A small remedy means in entire repertory, the remedy appears in less rubric.
Yes.
And you are helping me not to miss out that remedy in my analysis, because although it will not collect a very strong points, it may be the remedy that the patient actually needs.
Exactly.
So how the calculation happens so that it appears up in the list and I don't miss out? What is the logic behind it?
We know how many times a certain remedy appears in the repertory, and then there is a formula that when it's below a certain average, it gets pushed up, but of course only when it's enough times available in the rubrics that you chose for your patient. If if, of course, the remedy doesn't even appear in the rubrics that you choose for your patient, not much is going to happen in boosting small remedies. So they need to be available to a certain extent already in the rubrics. And when they are available on a certain in a certain amount versus the total, then they get a boost.
Yes, very clear. I understand very well. Now I want to move to another area of this tricky calculations. Tricky means not in a bad way, like clever details. I am talking about the contraindications. Again, I think it comes from Bönninghausen. Polarity analysis, like the pink rectangulars that show up in my analysis that don't give this remedy because
Yeah, that's Bönninghausen too.
from your wordings, can we hear how the contraindication works and why it's not a good idea not to give that remedy, or at least not to jump into a remedy with contraindication points?
Yeah, in the past, in the time that Bönninghausen used it, it was a little bit less complicated, I think, than it is now because we have so many remedies and it's not so black and white anymore due to also the clinical information that came into the repertory. But if we see that there's a remedy that has motion aggravates and it doesn't appear in motion ameliorates, it's polar rubric, yeah, the opposite meaning, yeah, then that remedy is extra recommended in a case where the case indeed aggravates by motion. Yeah. And if for that case we also have remedies that also appear in the polar rubric, so they also have strongly that motion can ameliorate them, then that remedy at that point for that analysis is not so much recommended. In the past, they and still some other softwares in Germany especially, they take it as a complete block. If that happens, they say you cannot give that remedy. That also appears in the polar rubric. We are a little bit more mild, so to speak, because there are situations that you can still give another remedy. And polarity, as such, don't forget that, is something that happens in a lot of the provings too, automatically, as a kind of mirror dynamics of the remedy picture, or in as a kind of mirror dynamics in the dynamics of the remedy.
My understanding of this polarity was it is because not everybody has the same humor and temperament, and therefore to the same remedy, different temperament people will react different. Do you think it is the correct understanding of polarity, or why the same remedy creating different reaction on different people?
I think, well, I don't know enough about what you are saying, so maybe it could be, but I think from what I know from, for example, Bönninghausen, he didn't use it as such, as how you explain it. He really just looked at what factual material did he have in the example, for example, motion aggravates, motion ameliorates. Did he ever see ameliorates for a remedy that that he's looking for that also has the polar of that? Then he didn't want to give it. Would it be one side only, or the aggravation, or the amelioration, and that would fit with the symptomatology of the patient, he would consider it. Bernhausen used it more in an absolute way. And for example, Rainer Frey also does that.
Uh-huh. You just recommend, you just mark the pink, but you don't rule out.
We don't rule out too quickly. We let the user decide also. And we just want to make it visible and give the possibility to the user to see that there could be a conflict, but it's up to them to see whether or not they go to listen to that or not. We don't take the remedies out. We leave the remedies in. We give them a corresponding place in the analysis, but they are marked in red, which means could be tricky.
Another thing that I realized is that you are also using Grant Bentley's homeopathic facial analysis coloring team.
To be honest, I don't know anything about that. That is a recommendation of Bentley's group given to Eduard, to the programmer, who's actually also a homeopath. And he did the work for them to put the pathophysiognomy in. Personally, I don't know anything about it.
Okay, I know a little bit. I read the Grant Bentley's book, and I say, as a user, I am happy to see it there because I integrate my knowledge about homeopathic facial analysis into of use, and I how to say I double check. Like if you didn't read the Grant Bentley's book and you don't know how to use it, then obviously you can't use that feature. But if you know what Grant Bentley says, and then you want to cross-check your analysis if it confirms or not, it's just another way of verification.
Yeah, I believe you because I think the expression rubrics that we have, for example, for the face, and also the colors of the face, and anything that has to do with human emotions in the background also doesn't lie. It's better than sometimes listening to them. It's better to observe them. And if you, I guess it has to do with if you use that information, you actually roborize your analysis.
What was the last word you used?
You make the potential remedies that are also covered by the pathophysiognomic symptoms. You make their remedies come out stronger. They because those rubrics don't lie. But that's actually the case with most of the physical rubrics. You know, the analysis becomes tricky often when you go to emotional mental level, mostly the emotional level, the mental not so much. But on the emotional level, people make a lot of camouflage and covering, but the face still has that expression or still carries those symptoms that don't lie. So I think it's very good also for that reason to never give up. What I see people doing in analysis right in these days, don't give up on physiological symptoms also, on body language. It's a very important part, and it keeps the also in analysis it keeps the analysis kind of unbiased.
That was a very good tip, and it also brings us to my conclusion about this interview, because my next question would be about, like, as an inventor of a repertory, I would like to get some tips from you, like what should be really mindful about using complete repertory, or any repertory, like what should be really careful about making homeopathic analysis to avoid mistakes and to be able to choose the remedy correctly. How best we must use repertory? What are the things we should be focusing on? What mistakes we should avoid?
Yeah, it's you know, if you want to make a work of art, and the finished product, so to speak, would be a healthy person. That would be your work of art. But to make that work of art, you need tools. And one of them is how to work with the repertoire. Of course, you need more tools than just one. So therefore, my answer is a little bit more complicated. You need to start with having your knowledge about homeopathy. You need to start having your knowledge about how to do an interrogation. Yeah, how to question your patients. What is it that you need to listen to, etc., etc. This is all pre-repertorizing. If you have an acute case, you should have a good materia medica knowledge, because what is asked from you by the patient is an instant remedy. They don't want to wait. They have acute problems. In such a situation, you often are not going to use the repertoire. You need to know your acute materia medica. So that's all pre-repertory work. When it comes to the repertory itself, this one tool, the thing that I see people have the most problem with is simply knowing how to translate the symptoms of the patient into the rubrics of the repertory, whether or not it's a small repertory or a large repertory. They have problems with that. Problems have to do with language differences, that because of the English not being their mother language, has to do with where to look in the repertory, so has to do with the understanding of the organization of the repertory, the hierarchy in the repertory. Of course, complete repertory is one of the repertories that has the most directions built in the form of cross references and references. So if you look at the wrong location, you will most probably still find a little hint that tells you, no, you need to go there. To find this rubric, you need to go to another location. The cross references and the references. So you need to be aware of that. The thing is, the only thing I can say is exercise. And if you don't know the repertory well enough, use the search functions that are there for that. They are very, very elaborate, very powerful. And gradually, by using the search function to go to a specific location where you want to be, gradually you learn to understand how those locations fit in a wider perspective in the whole hierarchy of the repertory itself. And then browsing the repertory, read it like a book, maybe a dry book, but start with A in the mind and end with clinical in the end. Mind in the beginning and clinical in the end. It's a big job. There's no shortcut. It's just a matter of hard work. I can tell you, because after 40 years, I'm still putting new material in, means it's never finished. It's a big manual about how to make a work of art. The work of art is not the repertory. The work of art is the healthy patient.
Exactly. I have no more new questions. If you want a particular message for Turkish audience, I can take it. Otherwise, this was a very good closing to me. Is there anything particular you want to say to the Turkish audience?
As I have a very, or in the past, I had a very nice neighbor, still a good friend of mine, who is Turkish originally. He's a mathematician. He lives in Holland. I came to know Turkish people. He made me understand it's mostly the people from the Mediterranean area. They have a Mediterranean attitude. So they are passionate people. They love life. And that's actually one of the big things you need to be also a good homeopath, I think. So automatically, many Turkish people are already in the right direction, you know?
By nature.
Yeah, by location. In a way, I think it's a pity that the laws are so strict that only doctors can do homeopathy, because I'm also a non-doctor. I studied medicine, but I never finished it. And I didn't do it on a university level. So I know also that what you actually need for homeopathy is perceptance and a good brain and the motivation to study. But it's also a work of love, and that has a big influence. Has nothing to do with what your former profession is. Anybody can learn that if they are perseverant enough. So, well, let's see about that. That's a political matter. It's a matter of how hard the pharmacies want to push against it, and there's a lot of bad will involved in not making that happen. But I hope in the futures many works of art will be established in Turkey.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this conversation, this interview very, very much. I will be very eagerly and happily create the video and make it available, make it known in homeopathic communities.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye bye.
Take care, Sam.